Many of you know the seventh person in my family, our dog Sophie. Sophie is our 12-year-old dachshund, and the older she gets, I feel the worse she gets. Of every time you could take a step backwards, you could literally smush her, because when you're up walking around the house, it's literally she's walking right behind your feet. You know, if there's multiple people in the kitchen, she's usually just kind of walking in circles, or you hear the little her little nails kind of start scattering because she's so quick to begin moving in what she's doing. Also, too, you have to be careful. If you're sitting at the dinner table and you swing your leg out too hard, you have an opportunity to kick her. At that moment, she's waiting for food that's going to drop, but ultimately you can hear the little pitter-patter of her nails behind you around the house, following you constantly. And this is ultimately the picture that David wants us to see this morning as we close out our series. In verse 6, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Ultimately, this is a picture of a sheepdog who chases the sheep and gets them to go where they need to be. This is the picture that David is bringing into our mind, that surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. That as a shepherd would begin to make its way back off the summer ranges down back home, the sheepdog would be what chases the sheep and keeps the sheep in line, keeps the sheep in order as they go back to their home. And the dog would chase them. And you can look up for hours the different unique things that these sheepdog can do to corral and to bring the sheep home. But he is saying here that goodness and mercy shall follow me or pursue me all the days of my life. All the days of my life. Think about that for a moment. The psalmist is saying that God pursues you with goodness and mercy. I'm not sure of your view of God, but we often can view God as not that. We may have had a situation happen in our lives, and we may say, God, where are you? What are you doing? Where have you been? You saw this happen, but I don't believe you did anything about it. Or we take God as just the cosmic vending machine. I want this from you, I want that from you. But the psalmist is saying, in the hardest of times, in life's hardships, we just came out of verse 4, the valley of the shadow of death, that surely, no matter the circumstances we're in, if we look and we see, goodness and mercy pursue us. Oftentimes what happens, it's my blinders that are on that misses God's goodness and mercy in my life. But if I take a step back and I peel them away, I can see where God's goodness and mercy have been all the days of my life. Let's take a glimpse at what this goodness and mercy is. A.W. Tozer, who is a Christian theologian, he writes about the attributes or characteristics of who God is. And he says this about God's mercy in his book, The Knowledge of Holy. He says, the goodness of God is that which disposes him to be kind, cordial, benevolent, and full of good toward men. He is tender-hearted and of quick sympathy. His unfailing attitude toward all moral beings is open, frank, and friendly. By his nature, he is inclined to bestow blessedness, and he takes holy pleasure in the happiness of his people. Not just a happy of a feeling of, right, I won this, or I got a good test grade, but it's an eternal feeling. And he goes on to say the goodness of God is the drive behind all the blessings he daily bestows upon us. God created us because he felt good in his heart. It's amazing thing that you're sitting here this morning, you have a name, you have a heartbeat because God is that good. That's a good thing he's saying right now. That's his goodness just lavished upon you, that you exist as a person. And oftentimes in our society, we can kind of look back and be like, why am I here? Or all these things have happened. But simply because you're here this morning or anybody's here, that's the goodness of God displayed in your life. And he says he redeemed us for the same reason. David, a couple chapters on in Psalm 34, he even says, here, take a look. He says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Right? Anybody have like a favorite food they like to devour? I'm not even going to ask John because If it's free, he loves it. But Brian loves tacos. Right? We all have food we love, and he says it's an experience. We can experience the goodness of God. That God is a good God. And not only is he good, but he chases after us like a little dog nipping at our feet with his goodness in our lives. And oftentimes, again, I'll say this, I'm the one that I don't see his goodness because I'm looking at all the bad things, or I'm just like, I'm in the wrong place in my own heart, or I'm bitter, or I haven't shown someone forgiveness, and so I don't see it clearly. But this is a spiritual truth for followers of Christ and anyone, that the goodness of God chases them. He also says it's his mercy, and so God's mercy is his tender-hearted, loving compassion for his people. It's his tenderness of heart toward the needy. One way of discerning what mercy is not getting what I do deserve. So mercy is also something that cleans up after me. So just as I walk, like I'll bake chicken, and my dog Sophie is standing here at the oven. I get it off, and I'm like, how does she know this? I put the chicken on my plate, and I'll walk, and again, I hear her little nails on the hardwood floors following me, hoping she gets some chicken. And if I drop any, what does she do? Eats it right. I can't even sometimes get down to the ground fast enough. I mean, that's what happens when your face is that far off the ground. So mercy does. Mercy cleans up after us. I don't know about you, but I've made bad decisions. I've made some mistakes in my life. And they could have turned out a lot worse, but God had his hand in it. And all of us are in that same place, that God walks behind us, cleans up after us. Later on in Psalm 139, it says he actually goes before us and follows us and places his hand of blessing upon our head. So we have to come to grips with something this morning then. Do I actually believe this? Do I believe this about Jesus? Do I believe this in my life? That his goodness and his mercy just comes after me? We often can walk with the mindset of, right, it's all bad, nothing good's happening. But this is a truth that he lays out there. Are you in the firm belief that no matter what occurs in your life, it's being followed by goodness and mercy? Now again, sure, because we're human, we all can look at circumstances, whether recently or in the years in the past, that have really hurt us, have broken us, have left us shaken, hurting. But even in the midst of that, do you believe that God's goodness and mercy are still in pursuit of your life? And sometimes I just need to take a step back, get my eyes off my situation, gain some perspective, and say, Lord, show me where you've been good, where you've been merciful. And it never fails that there always is, even in the hardest of times. As we've been looking at this series, we've been going back to John chapter 10 often because this is where Jesus refers to him as the good shepherd. And he says this, I am the good shepherd. I know my own sheep and they know me. Just as my Father knows me, I know the Father. So I sacrifice my life for the sheep. Nothing can happen in my life. Nothing. And everything points to a God who loves me and sent his Son to die for me, Jesus Christ on the cross. And that's one of the greatest good. That's really, I don't need any more good ultimately in my life than that, because that redeems and restores and brings life, that someone would lay their life down for me. The person of Jesus Christ, fully God, fully man, who came to live the life I couldn't live, died the death I deserved because of my sins. That right there in itself is a goodness and a mercy. But it also works out in our lives daily and individually, that God pursues you and he chases you with goodness and mercy. Now we're going to do something different at this time. And we're going to go back and we're going to sing that song, Goodness of God, again. Because song is a way to help us to rethink, help us to meditate, help us to think upon what God has done. It's also, I need to just declare it many times to begin to believe it more and more and more. And so we're going to go back through, we're going to sing this song again, but I encourage you to sing it in such a way that you're saying, Lord, this is what you've done for me. What you've done for me. And I pray if you are feeling just beat up, destroyed, that in the moment of this song, that you would sense what God has done for you in His goodness and His mercy. And so if you would, let's stand again, and we're going to sing this song.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. In all my days, I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. In all my life you have been faithful. In all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. In all my life you have been faithful. In all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Amen. You may be seated. Now, we can sometimes believe because of how other people have treated us, what they've done to us, that therefore God is not good and merciful to me. That's a human, that's not God. And God does do that in our lives. Jesus has done that for us. And now when we know that his mercy pursues us, his goodness pursues us, we can live a little bit differently now. Did you know that sheep are phenomenal at restoring a pasture? Especially given enough space, that they know well they can eat the weeds, and then when the grass grows, they can eat it to a certain length, and then they know to move on to another location in the pasture to allow that to eat and to let it grow. And the other thing they do, especially if you can see here, there's a little decline or a little hill that they're on. When the natural outcomes of their body, manure, they leave it right there in their spot. It actually is one of the most natural fertilizers to help regrow a pasture. For a while, they were actually known as the golden hooves that improve the land. You can go look at research, you can go look at stories on Google about how they were called the golden hooves because they restored the land. I love that idea right there, right? His goodness and mercy shall pursue me like a dog, nipping at my feet. But here are the sheep now restoring the pasture, making it improved. And so once we firmly believe in our heart that his goodness and his mercy, God's mercy, pursues me, I can leave it behind now to other people. I can restore, I can make it a better place like the sheep do, restoring a pasture. Do I leave goodness and mercy behind me after I'm gone? When you leave someplace, your workplace, your neighborhood, the grocery store, the family dinner over Thanksgiving, and people said, you know what? I feel like goodness and mercy were left behind. Or, when you leave, it's sadness and sorrow, right? Think about that. Let's even go more basic than that. Every time you get together with people, you're critical, right? Tearing other people down. You're rude. You say things to hurt other people. Or you encourage other people. Talk about good things. Do I leave goodness and mercy behind me that other people walk in that? Isaiah 52 says this, how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of the messenger who brings good news. Think about that for a moment. Talking of the gospel, but think about that for a moment. How often is your speech full of good news? Or is it full of things that we wouldn't consider good? What are you leaving behind? He says here, it's bringing the feet of good news, the good news of peace and salvation, the news that the God of Israel reigns. Let's brainstorm a little bit more together. This is where I need your help. What do you think it looks like to leave a blessing behind us after we've been someplace? Throw something out there. What do we do? They don't want you to leave. Okay, that could be, sure. Okay, right, you encourage people. Yeah, I know a couple people like that. I wish I had enough money to pay them just to kind of walk like right here behind my feet, telling me the things I need to hear, because I know some people in my life that you get together with them for like 2 minutes, and you're like, dude, how do you have this gift? Encourage people. Most of us, right, we don't ever even maybe pick one person to say, you know, I'm going to encourage this person today. I'm going to be intentional about encouraging someone. And everybody's dying to be encouraged inside. Wish someone would just say one thing. What are some other ways? Joy. Being a person of joy. Yeah. Love. Sure. Let's go try to go more tangible. Those are great. Sure. If someone you see is in need, yeah, step right into it. But how many times are we like, you know what? I got this, I got that. Like we rationalize our way out of helping other people. Right? It's a great one. Excitement? Yeah, being excited when you see someone. Yeah. Happiness? Sure. Being a person that's happy around other people? Sure. What this requires of us to leave goodness and mercy behind us is a life of intentionality, lived on purpose. for me personally, I have to think about that. To say, you know what, I'm going to walk into a situation and I'm going to look to leave something of goodness and mercy behind me. Often, though, we walk into places and we're just kind of, I would call us neutral. We're kind of just there. All right, we're just kind of there. But what are you leaving behind you after you leave places? That can be a very basic thing. Take a list of what you do during the week and ask yourself, what did I leave behind? It may be nothing I left behind. Or are you leaving goodness and mercy? Ultimately, this is one of the greatest ways to say, what do we ultimately believe about the gospel? That God sent his son, Jesus, to die for us. But also the gospel is good news that God chases us with his goodness and mercy. So what's our response to that? Our response should be to leave behind goodness and mercy wherever we go in life. He goes on in this verse, again, verse 6. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, kind of giving us a glimpse into eternity now. And I just want to draw us really to one place with that this morning, because I think this verse says it all for us. In the end of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, John sees, standing in eternity, all nations, tribes, and tongues around the throne of God. And he says this in Revelation 7, starting in verse 15. That is why they stand in front of God's throne and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will give shelter. They will never again be hungry or thirsty. They will never be scorched by the heat of the sun. For the Lamb on the throne will be their shepherd. And he will lead them to springs of life-giving water. Check this out. And God will wipe every tear from their eyes. For those who are in Christ, the follower of Jesus Christ, that have repented of my sin, believed in the finished work of the cross, this is what forever in the house of God is like. Look how practical that is, though, too. Right? It's not just floating around, right? Just floating around in some place. He literally says that he will wipe every tear from your eyes. Is that not goodness and mercy for eternity? This is where the psalmist leads us to when we look at the state of our souls, when we look at how we live our life, when we're to be at rest, he's constantly then drawing our eyes up to eternity. Because for the follower of Christ, this life doesn't dictate everything that goes on. But it's eternity that we keep in our hearts and our minds, and we live that way as well. But I love how practical that is. We maybe even shed tears this morning over something. But he said he'll wipe all of those from our eyes. And later on he says there'll be no more. Because that's how at peace we are with God. So this week, here's what I'm asking for us to do. The first one is I want you to be reminded that his goodness and his mercy follows you, pointing to eternity. And so I want you, especially if you get into this rut where you're feeling bad about something, you're upset about something, just to take a step back and process and say, Lord, show me where you've been good and where you've been merciful. But also realize that goodness and mercy are chasing you into eternity, where the ultimate place of goodness and mercy is forever. But do that, right? Whether in your head, on your phone, if you journal, take a moment to say, Lord, show me or write down where is God's goodness and mercy following you. And live in light of that, not based on all these other things that are taking place in your life. And also this week, I want you to find at least one way to leave goodness and mercy behind you as a way to give people a glimpse of eternity. What is one way you can leave goodness and mercy behind you as a glimpse into eternity? Ultimately, as we look at Psalm 23, we see that it's not just for our soul, but we see that this is a way to lead other people in their pursuit of the Savior as well. One of the greatest ways for you to share the gospel isn't by getting a Bible out and beating them up over the head with it. It's by you doing things that are merciful and good to other people that would then maybe lead to a conversation or open their eyes. Start there. Be good. Be people that are good and merciful to other people. Imagine that was the reputation you had, that, hey, that Christian's a good person. That they have a positive awareness of you in some way. And ultimately what we're doing is we're giving them a glimpse of eternity forever with the Father. So this week you can look inside and say, Lord, where are you following me with your goodness and mercy, pointing me to eternity? In at least one place this week, leave your goodness and mercy behind to show people a glimpse of eternity. As we went over the last 7 weeks, we saw the full season life cycle of a sheep and how we as people need to be led by a good shepherd, that we find rest in our souls that can restore us. No matter what we walk through, good things can take place in our life because of our shepherd. However, though, we must submit to the shepherd's care in our lives. And when we do that, not only will we be restored, but we can now go out and be a blessing to other people, which ultimately points us that I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.